In the end, yeah, the geek shall inherit the earth. Yes.
I mean, you love science, you talk about it. You were kind of a nerd in that respect. You went to MIT, you had a full career. You didn't need to be in politics, right? This wasn't what I assume it's not what you dreamed about growing up.
No.
Why, first of all, did Star Wars inspire you to get involved in science? And what inspired you to get involved in politics?
Well, first of all, I'm kind of offended that you called me kind of a nerd because I'm a full-blown nerd, okay? Full-blown, all the credentials, nerd pride.
Yeah. But why after like this very successful career you had as an inventor, and why did you get involved in politics for?
So I went to MIT, I started a company, had some inventions, raised venture capital, sold that, moved back to a farm in Kentucky where I grew up, and built a house off the grid, was semi-hermit for a while, just wanted to be left the hell alone, right? And then our county government started doing things, like trying to pass zoning ordinances that would affect what I could do with my property. And I thought, that's not right. And then they tried to raise our taxes. So I was like Johnny Letter Writer on Saturday Night Live. Like I got down, I wrote a letter to the editor, and I went down and I threatened the local politician. You know, I'm going to submit this letter to the editor if you don't listen to me. And he just laughed. Yeah. And that letter to the editor led to me being in Congress, because what happened is it rallied a bunch of people to show up at a meeting in 2006, 2007. Since there wasn't a Tea Party yet, they didn't know what to call it when it showed up in our county. They just called it Thomas's Angry Mob. So I've been a part of the mob since 2006.
Now you seem to be almost, you repel a lot of corporate lobbying, and is it that there's, I mean, that's...
Well, they repel me now, because I don't vote for their bills.
Have they given up on you?
Well, yeah, in fact, you know, most congressmen, when you get to DC, actually all of us, we are instructed to hire a fundraiser who helps us raise money from the lobbyists. So, you know, like all good congressmen, I hired a fundraiser, and we would do fundraisers here, and we would invite them, and we'd go have coffee with lobbyists and ask them for money. And after 2 years of this, and after twice voting against Boehner, she came to me and said, "You're fired." And I'm like, "Wait, no, I hired you." And she said, "Yeah, but I'm firing you because it's just too hard to raise money for you when you're not voting for their bills." She said, "In fact, after I fire you, don't go hire another one, because you're not cut out for raising money in DC." You know, she liked me, I still like her, but she's like, "Go raise it somewhere else, because they're not going to give it to you."
Today we are going to be discussing wasteful spending.
Well, I had a hearing this morning that stuck in my head. We had the Inspector General from over Afghanistan spending, reconstruction there. We spent $113 billion trying to reconstruct Afghanistan, right? $8 billion of this is on the war on narcotics, in other words, opiate production. Well, they produced 3 times as much opium in Afghanistan after we spent $8 billion trying to stop it than they did before. Afghanistan makes 90% of the world's non-pharmaceutical opiates. And I asked the assistant deputy director of the DOD over this program, like, how do you measure success? Like, you've spent $8 billion and they're producing 2 or 3 times as much of it. How is that success? And she tried to convince me, well, we've flown this many sorties and we got this many brigades working on it. And it's that just this morning. I mean, you can't ask me for a single example because
it's a Wednesday.
Yeah, it's a Wednesday. There's still more days in the week. There's still more time today. Yeah. I'll find something stupid like that. There was a bill called CISPA that they tried several times to pass in the House. And in fact, they did. They just didn't get it passed in the Senate. And then it became harder to pass that as soon as the Snowden revelations came out. So they renamed it. It's called CISA, not CISPA. And then instead of passing it as a vote, they stuck it in the omnibus. And it's supposed to be about internet security, but it's more about internet monitoring. And so what it allows is sort of real-time monitoring of internet traffic by the government and companies can share this information freely in real time, which means you're not going and getting a warrant for it. So I think it's very dangerous. It'll make it harder to keep to be anonymous on the internet. If you can keep all the breadcrumbs as they're being created, then you know everybody's tracks and where they've been. And so I think it's a really bad anti-privacy bill. They tried to couch it as a pro-security bill, but that's not what it is.
Do you think that without intellectual property laws or strict intellectual property laws, people are afraid to put their work out there to create, especially with technology, especially with, because it can be taken by anybody and claimed, and
Right.
they lose, they lose a possible chance of getting a big income, and that's important to people.
So in full disclosure, I have 29 patents.
Okay.
So, that's how I bought my farm, is I created something that did not exist on this planet before I created it. And then to keep big companies from stealing it from me, I patented it, and then I was able to sell it without having the idea stolen. Now, the way patents work is you tell the entire world how you're doing it. It's a deal you cut with society. You don't keep it in a black box. It's not like Colonel Sanders' secret recipe where you never tell anybody about it. You tell them all the spices and how much of each spice. But in exchange, you get a period of exclusivity, not forever, but for a limited period of time. And in fact, almost all of my patents have expired, so I make no money on them now. But they're free. Anybody now can benefit from what I did 20 years ago. And so that's the way patents work. Why is it important? This country is different from all the countries that came before it in this concept that what you create, you own. It doesn't belong to your neighbor. It doesn't belong to the government. It's yours. And so, this extends not just to things you do with your hands, but things you do with your mind.
Right.
And so the founding fathers put this in the Constitution. It's one of the few enumerated powers of Congress is to protect the works of artists and inventors for limited periods of time.
So Politico voted you as Mr. No. I think either last year or the year before. We're always branded as, the Republicans branded as the party of no. Why is no good?
No is oftentimes the only good vote that you have. Look, I vote with the party 79% of the time. Out of 246 Republicans, that means I am 243rd in party loyalty. Like, if you vote with the party 4 out of 5 times, you are branded as like a radical. Like, most people don't realize. Most of the time I am voting with the party. So it's this institution, the parties, that demand perfect loyalty. And so if you try to vote your district or your conscience or what you campaigned on, they brand you as Mr. No. You mentioned Jimmy Duncan, who's the congressman from Tennessee. I've talked to him about this on the floor, and he told me, he said when he took that vote against the Iraq War, it was the worst vote of his career. It literally almost cost him an election, it cost him friends, it cost him supporters, and it was a really devastating vote for him. He said, today, it's the best vote I ever took in my life. So sometimes the toughest vote you take is the best vote you've ever taken. And then the converse of that, you have Walter Jones, who voted for the Iraq War. And now he says, it's the worst vote I ever took and I regret it every day I wake up. And so he's sent letters to like all of the families that have had somebody pass away in the war over there, sort of to atone for that vote. And he takes this very seriously. So, there is a strain here. I would say it's myself and Justin Amash and Walter Jones are the strongest anti-war candidates. I want one of those T-shirts that says, I'm against the next war already.
Yeah.
Like, that's the T-shirt I need.